Now that there's a new Minions movie in theaters, there are now 17 Illumination movies, and it's time to rank them all. I've always viewed Illumination as a middle-of-the-road studio with a good amount of hits and a good amount of misses, so it's definitely an interesting ranking. Be sure to comment your ranking down below. I'd love to hear your opinions, but let's get straight into it. Coming in last place is Hop. I don't really think this one needs all that much explanation. It's just a complete head scratcher and a terrible idea for a movie. An Easter holiday film that blends live action and animation. Like, what were they thinking? It's such a stupidly simple and dull story without a single memorable moment. It's filled with extremely annoying characters and unfunny jokes, just a wild movie that is easily the worst on this list. At number 16 is a movie from earlier this year, the Super Mario Galaxy movie. I was so excited for this one, I wanted to love it, I loved the game, and I thought the trailers looked really good, but the thing about a trailer is that they're meant to show you the movie's highlights and not necessarily tell you the story, and that's a good thing in this case, because there is no story. The animation is beautiful, maybe the best on this whole list to be honest, and I love seeing these characters again on the big screen, but instead of there being any compelling reason for anything, you just have things happening with little to no explanation at all. It turns what should be a really fun experience into an absolute drag, and the fact that I love these characters makes the fact that they were done so wrong even more infuriating to me. Next up is The Secret Life of Pets 2. This is probably my least favorite of the Illumination franchises. I think it has a pretty decent concept, but doesn't do anything creative with it at all, and the sequel is just a worse version of that. It's so forgettable and frankly boring. None of the characters are interesting at all. For the most part, it feels like they're just recycling character arcs and beats from the first film, but in terms of the story, it feels like it's trying to juggle too much at once. There are 3 different storylines weaving together, and only one of them is even somewhat interesting. The rest, like I said, are completely boring, and this movie nearly put me to sleep. At number 14, I've got Despicable Me 4, a movie that takes Illumination's strongest franchise and attempts to run it into the ground. There are so many colossal misfires here, like completely sidelining Gru's daughters that have been pivotal parts of every other movie, giving Gru a son named Gru Jr., which makes absolutely no sense as Gru is his last name, not his first. The villain Maxime Lamal is absolutely terrible. I thought turning the Minions into superheroes would have worked better as a Minions movie in order to actually give that interesting storyline enough time to breathe, but at the end of the day, this is just a bad movie, and the only reason it isn't lower is because of its masterclass of an ending. Coming in at number 13 is the first Secret Life of Pets film. Like I said before, this is a good concept for a movie, and it had a lot of potential, but the execution was just not there. There's some decent jokes and a fine story, but everything just feels so bland. The lead characters have absolutely no memorable personality or life to them, and the story is completely forgettable. It's like they came up with a concept and were so proud of it, like, have you ever thought about what your pets do when you're not home? And they held their heads high and stuck that idea in every trailer, and then by the time the movie was ready to come out, they had completely forgotten to do anything creative with it. Just a shame that so much potential was wasted here by sheer laziness. Next up at 12, I have Minions: Rise of Gru. I was really enjoying and following alongside this movie for the first 45 minutes or so. I loved what it did with Gru as a character, and then the subplot about the Minions being trained in Kung Fu by Michelle Yeoh playing an acupuncture clinic owner is hilarious and entertaining. But where this movie's issues lie is in the third act, when it goes completely off the rails. We introduce magic and superpowers and Minions transforming into animals. It really just takes any sense of groundedness from the first half and throws it right out the window. And I know that this franchise isn't supposed to be grounded, but you know what I mean. This is just way too far out of nowhere. At 11, I have the first Minions. I can totally see why so many people crap all over this movie, but to me, it's just so much fun. It actually takes the main Minions and gives them decent character arcs for a bunch of creatures that speak in gibberish and eat bananas. I really like Scarlet Overkill as a villain. She's charismatic and unlikable at the same time, and the movie overall is genuinely funny in my opinion. I'm not talking about the slapstick fart jokes and all that you know is going to be in a Minions movie, but there are some genuinely clever jokes that made me laugh out loud. I know that by the books, it's probably not a good film technically, but it's just so much fun. Moving into the top 10, we've got Despicable Me 3. This movie is so needlessly complicated and overstuffed. If it had just been focused on Gru and Lucy trying to catch Balthazar Brad, that could have been great, because he is such an entertaining villain that doesn't get nearly enough screen time. And the reason for that is because the film decided to spend so much time on so many lesser subplots. Gru has a brother, Lucy wants to be a better mom for the kids, Agnes wants to find a real-life unicorn, the Minions go to prison. If they had just taken a couple of these and used them as a nice side piece to the main story, it could have worked, but it felt like the movie couldn't decide what was the main story and decided to make it all of the above. I don't want to just endlessly rag on this movie, though it is in the top 10, because like I said, I really like Brat as a villain, and I thought the Minions escaping from prison was the highlight of the movie. We're also just dealing with these likable characters that we've already spent 2 movies getting to know, and it's still a delight to see them on the screen, no matter what happens with the story around them. At number 9, I have Migration. This was the only movie I hadn't seen before making this list, but after watching it, it's a perfectly harmless story that never really goes below the level of being entertaining, but consistently has moments that rise above and make me say, wow, that was a really emotional or epic scene. The family at the core of this movie isn't the most original, it's kind of just a bunch of recycled cliches of characters, but cliches are cliches for a reason, and I'd be lying if I said they didn't work together. The only real problem is that the movie tries too hard to have an antagonist to the point where it doesn't make sense. Like there's this chef chasing around the birds for the second half of the movie trying to cook them. Like, no, when a flock of birds is migrating across a country, you are not going to make me believe that some random guy is actually just regularly crossing paths with them. Still a good movie, but it could have been great with a bit more originality. Coming in at number 8 is Sing 2. I think this movie flirts with some really interesting ideas. I don't know why, I've always enjoyed the whole retired star coming back into the spotlight, so I enjoyed the Clay Calloway storyline, but then obviously the highlight of the movie is its music sequences. Taron Egerton singing Sky Full of Stars is among the 5 best scenes in Illumination's history as a studio. It's just so incredibly good. If I had to point out an issue with this film, I'd definitely say it's the pacing. The first act is very strong, as is the third act, but that middle portion really slows to a crawl and makes for a fairly inconsistent watch in my opinion. But overall, I think this was a really creative and fun way to do a sequel to a movie that doesn't immediately seem like it would need a sequel, and I'd be interested to see what they could come up with for a potential third film. At 7, I have The Lorax. It feels weird talking about this movie as just a movie, because it's one of those films that feels like it's been memed to death, but as a story, I think it works pretty well. The conflict is clear and defined, the Onceler's transition from a likable loser to a completely egotistical, power-obsessed rich man is really well done, and I think it handles the weaving between past and present better than most films with this kind of structure usually do. Danny DeVito as the Lorax is unironically really good casting. It's one of the only roles I feel like DeVito got because he was right for it, not just because he has a funny and recognizable voice. And then possibly my favorite part of this movie is its soundtrack. I know some of the songs, like I said, have been memed to death, but they're genuinely good, and I find myself getting them stuck in my head every so often. In 6th place, I have The Grinch. This movie was never going to be the most original or the most entertaining since it's the 3rd iteration of this same story, but at the same time, I genuinely think it's my favorite. The old animated Grinch is too short for me to really even consider as a movie, and then the Jim Carrey version is a film I absolutely despise. I may go on a rant about it come Christmas time, but I think this version of the Grinch is a very pleasant middle ground. Benedict Cumberbatch is fine in the role, it doesn't feel like he's trying that hard, but everyone else in the voice cast really stands out. I also love the animation and the heartfelt nature of the story, and I don't know, Christmas movies always have kind of an unfair advantage in my mind, but I can't ignore it if it makes me enjoy the film more. A really pleasant watch that I find myself revisiting more than most of the movies on this list. Moving into the top 5, we have the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Sure, this is essentially just a film made by Nintendo saying, what can we put in here to make the most money and create the most nostalgia? And that's not a great way of doing things, and it leads to some obvious story and character issues, but aside from that, this movie kinda rules. The animation is excellent, and it makes certain scenes like the Donkey Kong fight and especially the Rainbow Road sequence all the more entertaining and visually appealing. Jack Black steals the show with probably the best voice performance on this entire list. He dominates everyone else in this movie, and it makes Bowser the best part. Yes, the story moves way too fast, and that sacrifices anything resembling an emotional moment or a fleshed out character, but I feel like this movie did exactly what I expected it to, so I can't exactly complain. Do I wish it was better? Of course I do, because the potential is right there, but I still thoroughly enjoyed myself, and this movie looks even better now compared to the garbage that is its sequel. At number 4, I've got the newest movie on this list, Minions and Monsters. This movie being a love letter to old Hollywood still blows my mind, and it's absolutely hilarious, and the fact that it works so well with Minions at the forefront makes it even funnier and more impressive. The main minions here, Henry and James, are actually really well written, like no joke. It feels like they've started to understand how to make the minions compelling characters and not just cute jokes meant to sell toys, and that fact already elevates this movie above most of its competition. Pair that with a hilariously bogus subplot of a robot falling in love with a women's rights activist, and you've got a supremely entertaining movie that is way better than it has any right of being. At number 3, I have The First Sing. This is a movie that's always resonated with me. I think it's a really fresh and creative story that's as well written as it possibly could be. The different dynamics between all of these characters just looking for their shot and trying to make their dream come true makes for an incredibly engaging story that makes you root hard for everyone to succeed. I think Matthew McConaughey is a really good voice actor. I wish he would do more of it, and that's certainly the case here. He probably gives the standout performance of the film. And I know I talked about how great Taron Egerton's singing in the second film was, but I still prefer his rendition of I'm Still Standing in this one. When these movies write scenes where Johnny the Gorilla gets to get up on that stage and perform, that's when they're at their best. I also think the third act is so good, and it all comes together for an emotionally resonant finale that gives me chills every time I watch it. In second place, I have the film that started it all, Despicable Me. It's such a simple and classic story that knows what it's trying to be and never wavers from it. This came in the time of all of the animation studios just churning out insanely creative ideas, and Despicable Me fits right into that mix. A supervillain being forced to reconcile his ways after learning the joys of fatherhood, that sounds like something Pixar would have come up with, and it's executed masterfully. Gru is such a compelling lead character, and his girls each have life and personality, something that can't be said for most of the side characters in Illumination movies. Vector works great as a counterpart to Gru. He's likable and unlikable at the same time, charismatic and an absolute loser, but most of all, he's hilarious. And the whole movie is really funny as a whole, just a blast of a film. But coming in at number 1 is Despicable Me 2. I think it's very cliche for someone talking about movies to say, oh, this sequel takes everything about the first movie and cranks it up to the next level, but it's just so true in this case. Not only do I feel like the story is just as compelling here, but we're also introduced to some franchise-defining side characters, like Lucy, and then in my opinion, the best antagonist on this whole list, El Macho. I've always thought he's intimidating in a way that Vector never really could be, and I think that makes him a much more imposing threat, which in turn leads to a more urgent and compelling story. I also think the animation noticeably improved from the first film to the second, and it makes for some of the most visually appealing environments I've seen. And I know I mentioned this in my Despicable Me ranking, which you can check out on the channel right now, but I can't talk about this movie without at least giving a shout out to the tortilla chip hat. I'm not saying it's the sole reason this movie is number 1, but I'd be lying if I said it didn't play a part. But that's my list. Please be sure to leave yours down in the comments below. If you haven't seen all these movies, that's okay. Just let me know if you agree or disagree with my list. If you want to help out the channel, you can like and subscribe. We're trying to hit 500 subs as soon as possible. But with that being said, thank you so much for watching, and God bless.